Hey YouTube, I wanted to apologize to everyone for taking so long to make this tag video or any other new videos lately. As some of you may be aware, my wife was gravely ill, and that's kept me a little bit distracted, but she's recovering very nicely. And I wanted to set aside some time to make this promised video and a few others. I also want to emphasize that I am not belaboring my argument with Theologica. As far as I'm concerned, he is completely finished. Once you get busted for lying, that destroys your credibility. However, I have not finished fully dissecting his arguments, so I want to go ahead and do this promised video on the tag argument now. Even though I know this is kind of a waste of time here, anyone who hears the tag argument, you shouldn't need me or anyone else to tell you why it's a load of crap. But nonetheless, a promise is a promise. So here is the transcendental argument for the Christian God as it is often presented by Christian apologists. And yes, step number one is just tossed right out there without anything to back it up. It's like they think it's a given. Sky is blue, water is wet, you can't possibly have morality without God. What? These people just don't seem to understand the fundamental difference between making an assertion and making an argument. In any event, I'm going to be focusing on the morality aspect of this tag argument because that's been the focus of my exchange with Theologica. Moving on to step two. I've already reviewed why the tag argument can't be applied to the Christian God. In the first place, what do you mean when you say that you cannot have morality without Yahweh? Do you mean to say that Yahweh is the supreme judge of all moral matters, in which case, how does my big brother analogy not apply? Or do you mean to say, as Theologica does, that Yahweh is the embodiment of goodness in the universe? In which case you have circular reasoning. We know that Yahweh is good because we know that Yahweh is good because we know that Yahweh is good, and so on and so forth. Additionally, when we read the Bible and evaluate it in terms of moral no-brainer issues, such as rape or slavery or punishing children for the crimes of their parents, we find that the Bible is on the wrong side of every one of these issues. Video links off to the side. Clearly, the Christian God is morally bankrupt by modern standards. But what about using the tag argument for God in general? And is there a reason why I won't go there? Let me give you another slide to consider. Alright, let's take the moral no-brainer issue of slavery. Let's assume that someone were to ask you, why is slavery wrong? Could you articulate that? Now, someone might answer, because God wills it. Or even elaborate further, saying, I believe that God gave me a conscience, and my conscience finds slavery objectionable, and therefore God must will the abolition of slavery. That makes for soaring political rhetoric, but somehow it falls short philosophically. God wills it is no more satisfying to philosophical inquiry than God did it is satisfying to scientific inquiry. Our desire for the truth requires us to delve in a little bit deeper, get a little bit more detail, understand the mechanics a bit better. Now, one of the ways to understand the mechanics is to explore human empathy. We could take the John Rawls approach and talk about the veil of ignorance. This was a tool that he used to understand issues of social justice. The way the veil of ignorance works is you try to imagine you're stepping back from society, and you're viewing it from a neutral third-party perspective. Neutral except that you know that you're going to be cast into that society in some role or other. Now, you don't know what role you're going to play. So that means you're going to be thinking about issues of social justice. You're going to want to level the playing field and make things as fair and as just as possible for everyone. You're going to be against slavery because you could wind up being the slave working in the field. It could happen to you, and therefore you would be against it. This is kind of a variation of John Stuart Mill's and his social contract, where we treat other people the same way that we would like to be treated ourselves. Now, Jesus allegedly commented on this, saying, as you would have others treat you, so do ye unto them. But really, religion is not required for this. Many secular philosophers have had the same thing to say. On the other hand, if you don't like appealing to human empathy, you could go the Jeremy Bentham route, talk a little bit more about utilitarianism and the pleasure principle. Jeremy Bentham's idea was that the universe contained a sum total of pleasure and a sum total of pain. And these were not fixed. Our actions could cause either one to go up or down. And things tend to be morally correct as they increase the amount of pleasure in the universe and or decrease the amount of pain. And things tend to be morally incorrect when they increase the amount of pain and or decrease the amount of pleasure. Now, Jeremy Bentham would say that slavery is wrong because it creates a massive amount of pain in the universe. Now, granted, there's the slaveholder who benefits from it, but it creates far more pain for far more people, and therefore slavery would be wrong for utilitarian reasons as well. Now, here's the interesting thing. I don't know that I've ever heard any of these philosophers use God as their justification for their ideas. Like, we should use utilitarianism to fully understand morality because God wills it. I've never heard them say this. And really, there's no reason for them to, because whether you're going the route of understanding morality from the aspect of human empathy, or you're going from the route of understanding it through utilitarianism, either way, it functions quite well without there being some sort of divine arbiter. We could have human empathy, for example, because we are social animals. We depend upon one another for survival in order to build these communities by which we may prosper. And so consequently, there's an evolutionary impetus in nature for us to have some sense of empathy. Now, on the other hand, if you're going to talk about utilitarianism, once again, you can understand that completely well and still be an atheist. So consequently, God really isn't required for either of these two views of morality to work. Additionally, religion tends to muddy up the entire discussion on morality. By its nature, religion is going to be more concerned about promoting itself and less concerned about anyone's spiritual well-being. Religions, by their nature, are going to demonize certain harmless activities like blasphemy or idolatry, while at the same time exalting as virtues certain useless activities like the proper performance of rituals, or praying, or attending church often enough. Religion is not at all helpful to our understanding of morality and really muddies up the issue. Now, if it were true that point number one, or step number one of the tag argument were such a given as they seem to think that it is, then you would have to expect that any secular philosopher, in order to have a coherent understanding of morality, would at some point have to appeal to divine authority. On the other hand, you would expect that religious authorities at some point might have a better understanding of morality than secular philosophers do. But we see that the opposite is true. Really, secular philosophers have the clearer understanding of morality because we understand that morality has to do with questions about our obligations to one another as sentient, self-aware beings.